Hi guys, it's me Quinn, and as always, if you appreciate my content, consider hitting the like button. It's the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. So I just finished watching the third episode of Apple TV's adaptation of Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, and I decided I'd review it here from my own space station, orbiting Earth in an alternate dimension. It's a long story, don't ask about it. Anyway, this episode continues to trend from the previous episodes of only being loosely based off of Asimov's books, as there are many liberties taken with the story. I would say that I enjoyed the first 20 minutes of the episode the most. It was interesting to get to learn more about the Genetic Dynasty, where it came from, and how it actually works. There are always three brothers: Brother Don, who is the youngest, Brother Day, who's the middle brother, and Brother Dusk, who is the oldest. Now it seems that at a predetermined time, Brother Dusk ascends, quote unquote, and is killed so that a new Brother Don can be allowed to be born into the world. Now all of this is done by way of cloning, and it's been going on for 400 years at least, since the time before the space elevator was even constructed. Now it appears in this episode that all of this, the cloning process, as well as the main duty of taking care of the Emperor when he's Brother Dusk, as well as advising Day and Dusk in their political tactics, as well as just being a companion, falls to Dimrozelle, who is some kind of AI. Now the character Dimrozelle does exist in the book, but is in a completely different incarnation, and I don't know how much of what is written in Asimov's books that they're going to actually use as far as this character. The Genetic Dynasty, as I mentioned before, is not in the books at all, but it is an interesting concept, I think. And it's particularly interesting when you consider it in the context of what led Trantor to fall ultimately in the books, leading to the collapse of the Galactic Empire entirely. A lot of it had to do with Trantor's inability to handle the administrative demands of an entire galactic civilization. And it also had a lot to do with the complacency of those in power. And I just look at a man who chooses to clone himself over and over and over so he can be emperor over and over and over. I can't help but think that because he will ultimately never offer anything new, he won't be able to evolve quickly enough with the changing empire and the new state of things, as more and more threatens the stability of the galaxy. Now, that could be changing. There were some hints in this episode that the new iteration of Dawn is perhaps a bit different, choosing to have the mural erased instead of continuing the process of painting it as all of his predecessors have done. Now, obviously, Dimrozelle is all tied up into this. We just don't know exactly how. She's definitely got plans that have been in the works for a really long time. Another curious thing that we learn about her in this episode is that she definitely feels a certain degree of love for all of the iterations of the Empire. And I wonder to what degree she influenced the original Empire to go through with this whole cloning thing, watched over by her. These are all mysteries that are being set up to hopefully be solved in the future episodes, and I'm looking to learning more about this whole plot line and seeing it unfold. So there's also a few time jumps in this episode. We see the Empire 400 years ago. We see the construction of the space elevator, or the beginning of the construction of the space elevator, and then it jumps to 19 years after the destruction of the space elevator. And then it jumps 17 more years, and we see the most recent iterations of the brothers Day, Dusk, and Dawn. And I imagine that these are the ones that we'll be continuing to deal with in the next episode. In the second part of this episode, we get into what life is like for the people on Terminus. This part of the episode I definitely thought dragged a little bit in comparison to the first part of the episode. They are taking a lot of things from the books and mixing them around and making them a little bit different. First of all, Mayor Hardin is Warden Hardin in this, and it looks as though the first Selden crisis is happening a lot sooner than it happened in the book. Now, in the book, the first Selden crisis happens about 50 years after they take up residence on Terminus. And if I remember correctly, in this episode, it was only about, it doesn't state exactly how long, but it seems to have only been about 20 years at maximum just judging by the age of Warden Hardin. So in the books, Harry Seldon does leave behind a vault, and in the book it's actually set to open at a specific time, and everyone on Terminus is actually preparing to see what's in the vault and preparing for what happens when it opens. But it looks like in the show they're setting up a different kind of mystery involving it, and it reminds me a lot of actually Dan Simmons' Hyperion novels, because in the Hyperion books there are these mysterious objects on the distant world of Hyperion called the Time Tombs, and the Time Tombs basically emit these anti-entropic fields, which suddenly begin to expand for some reason and no one knows. So in this episode, when they talk about the field surrounding the vault expanding, I couldn't help but think of Hyperion. In this episode, it appears that the expansion of the fields around the vault has something to do with the fact that Anacreon is planning something and trying to sneak to Terminus, even though it is illegal for the outside world to interfere with what the encyclopedists are doing on Terminus. I have to admit, I spent this whole section of the show waiting for the vault to open, because, slight spoiler here if you don't want to hear this and jump like 10 seconds, in the book, inside of the vault, it's a hologram of Seldon that tells them something about the crisis they're going to face. So this episode being called The Mathematician's Ghost, I thought for sure that was going to be that, but it turns out that the vault did not open at all. They're going to draw it out a little bit longer and tease the vault for a little bit longer. Understandable, but it did kind of, for me, take the wind out of the episode a little bit. I was left just slightly disappointed at the end when the vault didn't open. It kind of like sucked the wind out of it for me just a little bit. But ultimately, I understand why they're holding out on getting to the mystery of what is inside of the vault. There is a moment in this episode where Hardin is shown a representation of Harry Seldon's psychohistory calculations and predictions, and she's asked if she sees anything in it. And for a second, I thought that she was going to understand psychohistory suddenly just by looking, and I thought, please don't do this. That's not how it works. Do not do this like she can magically understand it for no reason. But they didn't do that, thankfully, and I just want to say I'm really happy that they didn't go in that direction, because I felt like that would have ultimately been a mistake. That would have exposed a fundamental misunderstanding of how psychohistory is supposed to work in the book. So that's not the direction that they went, and I'm happy that that didn't happen. Now, what I want to know is how much of this show is going to involve Hardin on Terminus dealing with the first Seldon crisis, because I don't want to see that for the next 4 or 5 episodes. I would really rather they continue to jump and continue to show the bureaucratic and administrative failures that led to the collapse of the Galactic Empire, as well as the building blocks of the new Galactic Empire. That is what I'm most interested in seeing. That is what the books are ultimately about. And I hope this show doesn't get lost into trying to do tropey things just to satisfy an audience that doesn't really care about hard science fiction. But I think the jury is still out on that, and I did ultimately enjoy this episode, although I thought, like I said, it dragged a little bit at the end, and I was kind of hoping that it kind of went in a different direction and had a more satisfying ending. Now, there was no mention in this episode of Gail Dornick or the character Rach, who I didn't realize that was supposed to be Rach from the books, who is a character in the prequel books, because this character is really, really different from the way he's depicted in the book, so I didn't even think that that was him. But the character Rach, who in my last review I said I didn't know who he was and he wasn't from the book, that's who that was. I guess I just missed his name or something, but they weren't in this episode at all, so we don't really get to know what happened to him after Harry Seldon's death. So I guess they're holding out that mystery as well, and as well as the mystery of where Gail Dornick is and where she's off to. Without spoiling too many things, there are people in the books that have certain abilities called mentalic abilities, and it is possible that Gail Dornick in the show has mentalic abilities. There's another character that was mentioned in the first episode, the Mule, who is a huge character later on in the books, so maybe Gail Dornick is tied into that storyline somehow, since she is narrating a lot of what's happening throughout the show. So that is also one of the essential mysteries that remains to be seen. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe for more Quinn's ideas.
Wow, were we even watching the same episode? That review was straight garbage. You're the sorriest excuse for a YouTuber I've ever seen.
And you could do better?
If I had my own YouTube channel, I would have 40 billion subscribers.
Then start your own YouTube channel. I mean, it's free. Like, anybody can do it. Like, do it.
I will, and then you'll be finished.
Just do it.
Okay. Stop f***ing commenting bullshit on my videos. Sick of this shit.